Snow at Heaven's Edge, Chapter 15. A golden ray flashed before Lin Ruting. He pivoted, narrowly avoiding the cut. The two fighters stood 20 feet apart on the empty street. Ming held his sword at eye level and pointed it straight ahead. Lin Ruting saw the sword clearly now, as it waved back and forth like a serpent, and judging by its sway in the light wind, the blade was extremely thin. A magnificent sword, Lin Ruting marveled. The blade was the one and only belt sword he had seen, and by its appearance he knew it to be the famed weeping willow. The speed and flexibility of the blade came at the cost of its strength and durability. To wield such a sword, Ming had to be an elite swordsman who kills without ever touching blades with an opponent. Both men stood and waited. Various scenarios played out in each of their minds, attacks and counters and counter-counters. Lin Ruting anticipated Ming to take the initiative. He was right. The younger swordsman charged, making wide circles in the air with whipping willow as a distraction. Lin Ruting focused on Ming's shoulder and arm in order to time his counter. When the younger man closed in and struck, Wuai caught his sword hand and guided it away. Wuai spun to Ming's weak side, staying close to deny him space. He had formulated a strategy to fight the battle. The blade's flexibility meant he needed full speed to extend and maneuver with authority. Ming had to push and pull with each cut for maximum effect. To thrust, he needed even more space. Wuai's methodical and circular footwork tested the flexibility of whipping willow to its limit. The sword strokes came sharp and quick. Each strike was accurate and precise, matched only by Wuai's own palm strikes and kicks in the spine of the blade. He kept moving to Ming's weak side and away from a direct assault. "Is this how you fight, or do you miss a sword?" Ming taunted. "The sword is in my heart, and the fight has already been mine," Lin Ruting countered. Ming sneered. He feigned moving in one direction and then pivoted in the other to separate himself from Wuai. He somersaulted backwards to add even more distance between them. They squared off once more. "You are toying with me," Ming said, disdain written all over his face. "Young Master Tang, I assure you I am not." "Then get yourself a sword, and we'll fight again, and you have no time." "I have all the time in the world. It is you who must go before Wu Tianxue returns. It is you who would need to take victory from my hands." Lin Ruting meant every word. He adopted the mindset of an immortal, where he had all of eternity, a disposition toward inaction over rash action. Patience took the day, always. The key was to outlast and outsuffer one's opponent. At the outset of the battle, he felt the tremulous unrest within Ming through his words and actions. An unfocused mind coupled with taut emotions prevented the younger man from executing effectively enough to beat him. He had seen enough and wanted to end the duel. He set his feet slightly apart, similar to his opening stance with the sword. His path to victory was already in motion, and his body moved after the trailing images drawn in his mind's eye. The speed of his movements overwhelmed the recoiling Ming, whose thoughts vacillated between past, present, and hypothetical events to come. The young swordsman had not expected a sudden and explosive attack. In a few heartbeats, Lin Ruting closed the distance and thrust at him. "A sword! A sword!" Those were the only thoughts running through Ming's mind. He was not sure how the man had obtained or perhaps hidden the blade the entire time, but the tip of the blade came flying toward him. The image split in two and then three and four until he felt surrounded and uncertain of how to retreat. The fight ended with an invisibly fast swordsman and one paralyzed into inaction. Ming fell to his knees. Rivulets of sweat lined his palms. He had not feared death, but as he saw it approach, an overwhelming sense of disappointment and regret bore down and suffocated him. The young swordsman lifted his head to see an unarmed Lin Ruting. "That is fear," Lin Ruting said. "Very few are that fortunate to still feel," Ming filled in. He felt so ridiculously sheepish to be kneeling there when he had been so sure of victory. At least not lose in this fashion and to this extent. His body shook with violent laughter. How many more years would it take to reach Lin Ruting's level? "Why did you take up the sword?" The question surprised Ming, for he had not expected an attempt at consolation. Why had he? It was a very long time ago, but time always seemed longer when measured by losses and disappointments and betrayals. He had wanted love, recognition, and vengeance, not just on the naysayers, but on the many wrongs he had suffered. Ultimately, he settled on an image, one that would remain with him for the rest of his life. He was kneeling then just as he was now, a much younger Ming, in front of the headless bodies of his parents. He was a good swordsman then as he was now, but not good enough. Not enough for them to take pride in, and not enough to save them. He knew the feeling he abhorred, but he could not say it aloud. Lin Wuai seemed to understand and sat down next to the dejected young man. I met a monk a long time ago in the southern city of Suzheng. He asked me whether I would buy a slab of ice from him for 100 ingots of silver. I told him no. He dropped the price to 50, then 25, but I still rejected him. Would you, if you could find relief from the heat? Of course not. The price is too steep, even at 10 silver ingots for something that is ultimately ephemeral. Exactly my answer. Do you know what he said to that reply? He told me that I was a fool, because there are so many people in the world who are willing to give up even their lives for things which are like dust in the winds of time. Wuai smiled. Would your skills have improved if you won? Have they diminished now that you did not? Lin Wuai stood and proceeded to open his stance with his short fingers, the index and middle, pointed straight ahead. He moved gracefully but with gravitas. Colors flooded his vision as if all he saw before was a dreary gray. The haziness surrounding him dissipated and his word became more vivid and crisp. Tang understood now. How could he expect a sword weighed down with confusion defeat something so light and free? He wanted something only others could give, and in that he had ceded all power even before the first stroke. Lin Wuai's swordplay was a contrast to his own. Brother Lin, I have benefited greatly from your instructions, he said, bowing reverently. It's nothing. I'm merely polishing a well-made blade. How can I accept such a grand gesture? Lin Wuai said as he helped Tang Ming to his feet. Besides, I would have to trouble you with a favor. Please, Tang Ming said. I'm worried about my wife. I fear Wei Qingren would stop at nothing to find the messenger. There's also the problem of Miao Dan. The storyteller? I'm afraid he might not be who he appears. He could be one of the bandits gifted in the art of disguise. I will assist Lady Lin. Thank you. You are staying? Yes. Wu Tianxue. The little urchin has been entrusted to my care by a very good friend of mine. Tang Ming nodded. For someone like Lin Wuai, his word was his promise. The day was quickly passing, and he too began to worry for Li Xiang. You better get going, Lin Wuai said. Use your sword as it was intended. He left Tang Ming in the middle of the empty street and returned to the inn. His thoughts shifted to food and the agony it would be to prepare dinner. The young man called after him. Why did you? Lin Wuai looked quizzically at the young man. You asked me earlier why I practiced the sword. So why did you? To find beauty, to find peace. Li Xiang almost doubled over in laughter. Come on, we have to keep going. Are you mad? She ignored the plea and continued to laugh without regard for Feng Xiaoyan's worried expression. Do you want to die this badly? Xiao Yan asked, voice raised. All right, Xiang calmed herself. What was that all about? Xiao Yan asked as they continued to dart, crouch, leap, and slide across the frozen landscape. Karma, Xiao Yan jie. Bad karma. Now I understand. I used to go with my father to hunt, and while we went looking for tigers and wild boars, I tried my best to find foxes, rabbits. I preferred ones in a large group, in families. They move slower and are less hesitant to run. I hunt because I like to brag about the kill. She smiled. Feng Xiaoyan nodded. Whatever those foxes and rabbits wanted to do or see, they'll never get to because of me. She said with regret written on her face. I'm not gonna hunt like that again. Not for that reason. Xiao Yan felt the weight of the girl's words. Don't worry, we can all make amends as long as we are alive. The girls took a more slippery path where the snow had frozen into ice to minimize the trail that they left behind. They slipped and fell numerous times, but instinct told them that they had to push on, for they never fully lost Fang Hai, who threatened to overtake them at any moment. Where are we going? Li Xiang finally asked as they seemed to be heading further northward. Not we. You. Ruting jie is going toward the pass. Just keep going down this path, Xiao Yan said. Where are you going? I'm going to take that bastard to his grave. She saw the young girl try to protest. Listen to me and go. I don't want to lose another. Xiao Yan swiped at her blurry eyes. Li Xiang felt the sting in her own eyes as she embraced the elder girl, but was quick to grasp the logic of things. "I would not let you die," she said, and ran. Xiao Yan inspected the ground carefully and covered the footprints left by the girl. She walked off the icy path this time and made a new set of tracks. She thought about the lake. Had she seen others, she might have called it a pond, for it was small, nothing more than a puddle in relation to the vast expanse of the forest that environed it. She knew how the lake looked, and remembered the ample caution her parents had impressed upon their children on the dangers of visiting the frozen lake. "You can be gobbled up by the water spirit," they had said. The girl smiled as she found a good-sized rock. She tore off a piece of cloth from her ragged cloak and wrapped it around the stone. She stood up and looked around. Trees lined either side of the slippery ice, and no one in sight. She took a step, first one foot, then the other, onto the smooth surface. She bent her knees and pushed down. The ground was unyielding. She took a step back and swung the cloth and stone. Pieces of snow and bits of ice flew. What remained was a small crater. Satisfied, she walked farther into the frozen lake. After a while, she stopped to feel the ice beneath her feet. A soft crackle emanated from below. She retreated and examined the floor again, mentally marking the invisible margin until she was confident of its size and thickness. It felt good, almost like digging a grave. She smiled and glanced at the mountain peaks on the horizon. For a brief moment, she thought about what lay beyond them and the stories Li Xiang had told. It was beautiful. During a large part of the journey, Lin Ruting conversed with Mao Dan. Xiang recognized that they merely exchanged platitudes. She drifted behind and turned her attention elsewhere. Without leaves and smaller brushes, the forest looked naked. Some areas were still dense with clusters of trees growing in proximity. Xiang always made special note of spots where bandits, stalkers, and rapists could hide. Soldiers flanking the procession were there to keep the citizens captive, not to protect them. Their incessant stares harbored much malice, and she kept a wary eye on them. "Be careful of Wei Qingren and his men," Tang Ming cautioned. She wished dearly that he was here. She clutched the small bag around her shoulder. "If something bad happens, look out for yourself. Remember that," he had said. She wondered what was more important to him, the fight, her safety, or the item within the bag. Men were always strange yet delightfully childish creatures. But they were also capable of immense cruelty and extreme pettiness. "What a liar," Lin Ruting said as she sat down. One of the innkeeper's helper was rationing out the lunchtime meal. Xiang had already guessed that much, as the smile and courteous gesture by the older woman was superficial in a way only a woman can tell. The stories were mere wives' tales, far-fetched from his famed tales. "But you wanted to keep an eye on him," Xiang said. Lin Ruting smiled. "You are rather perceptive." "Being perceptive is what I'm supposed to be," she wanted to say, but instead simply smiled in return. Xiang ate the simple meal while her heart calculated the distances. Though she had never taken the northern route, she knew they were moving far too slowly. The bag that hung from her shoulder contained nothing heavy, but it felt like an increasing burden. A shout disturbed her sorrowful thoughts as one of the soldiers stumbled forward. "The food's been poisoned," bellowed Wei Qingren as he grabbed one of the servants from the inn. "I don't know anything. I know nothing," he mumbled. His plea came on deaf ears. The general swiftly snapped the young man's neck. His attention shifted to the remaining assistant and Chen Daming. Both fell to their knees as Lionhead Wei stumbled toward them. Pleas of innocence poured from the men's mouths. Lin Ruting intervened, moving unsteadily in between the general and the two men. "Wait! If you hastily kill anyone suspicious, then you would never find the culprit." Xiang had her own suspicions, but her eyes never moved his way. Whatever poison was in the food must be some form of muscle relaxant, for no one was dead or dying. "We must be wary of an ambush," she blurted. Those last words had an effect on the paranoid bunch. Sabers flew from scabbards, spears moved this way and that as if to scare off invisible foes. Xiang stood and was surprised to find no ill effects for consuming some of the food. Commotion spread amongst the people. Others began to stand and stretch and flex. "I'm not poisoned," a man yelled. Not all were as exuberant, and warned that death would merely come in different form at different times. Others whispered amongst themselves to run at the first sign of an attack. This poison provided the perfect decoy. No one had the strength to calm the crowd. Lin Ruting stumbled and nearly fell to the ground, but a strong hand steadied her. "Brother Ma," she whispered. "I'm alright, thanks to Wu Niang who ate my share." He put a finger over his lips to keep it secret. "I would do whatever to assist you." "Thank you," Ruting said as she sat and attempted to regain some strength through meditative qi exercises. Wei Jingren followed suit. Ma Xiande held onto both his wife and his sword. He saw a small figure, no more than a dot, heading towards them. When he tried to focus on that individual's footfalls, they fell too faintly for him to get a good assessment. It must belong to someone with great levitation skills. The speed and rhythm remained constant, and he gripped his sword tighter. "Who is it?" he yelled. His voice echoed through the plains, momentarily stopping the figure. It continued to move closer, closer, and closer still. "Miss Li Xiang!" Lin Ruting, who was in deep meditation the entire time, opened her eyes, and a most radiant smile formed on her face. She sprang up and ran to the girl. Wei Qingren opened his eyes for a moment, and seeing nothing immediately threatening, soon closed them. Xiao Yan jie, the girl muttered through labored breaths. "We must help her." Li Xiang suddenly broke off the embrace and pointed toward the direction from which she came. "We have to hurry." Lin Ruting took a few steps forward and stopped. "Brother Ma, I will watch over Miss Pao Xiang as I do my wife," he vouched. With that assurance, Lin Ruting started off after Li Xiang, hoping that the fatigue will wear off when she got moving. "Where is the girl?" a voice asked. Xiao Yan ignored him. The crunching snow under the man's heavy feet told her he was closing in. She did not turn. When she heard nothing but the softest crackling, she smiled. Ice. After a few heartbeats, she heard the slow metallic ring of a drawn sword. Eventually, she heard a loud crack like the snapping of an especially brittle twig. 7 feet. He was within her radius. She turned abruptly, letting her hood fall, and her long hair cascaded to the side. Fan Kai, surprised by the sudden act, retreated several steps. More cracks in the ice followed his every step. He looked at the unsteady ground and saw deep veins splintering the icy slab. A loud whack sent ice fragments flying. The girl was smiling as she went about smacking the frozen surface of the lake. Content with what she had accomplished, she threw the rock away and began to jump, leaping up and down in front of him. "Stop, you crazy wench!" Fan Kai shouted as he watched the ground split, and they plopped into the freezing water. Somewhere between the thought of death and the unrelenting coldness, Xiao Yan heard an unexpected voice calling her name. When her mind finally made sense of it, she was sprawled across the snow with a heaving Lin Ruting slumped next to her. "The bastard, where is he?" Xiao Yan sat up, coughing. Throwing herself at the thin piece of ice was the last resort, but if she were to die, she wanted to take the bastard with her. He disappointed her. Partially wet, but not at all shivering, the man stood next to the gaping hole. He stared at Li Xiang, and then at Lin Ruting. The future unfolded before his eyes, and his hands trembled with anticipation. He took deep breaths to contain himself. After all, he was a disciplined man, and Lin Ruting was no easy match. He was not about to test her fame while being emotional. He needed a steady hand for a hard task. Lin Ruting gestured at Li Xiang, and the girl retreated, bringing Xiao Yan with her. "We need to go. If the madman gains an advantage, then we need to run," the girl said in a way that suggested she had been in similar situations countless times before. Xiao Yan nodded, but her attention was still on Lin Ruting. Something was wrong. The woman was slightly slouched over and breathing hard. Xiao Yan surprised herself when she whispered a prayer for the woman. Fan Kai made no speech this time. Some people were beyond the persuasion of human logic. He had to tame the bitch first. He lifted his naked blade over his head and jumped high into the air, bringing the weapon down with all his might. It swished through the air. Lin Ruting had rolled to the side. Her sword flepped from its sheath and lashed at his exposed flank. The man recovered and parried the strike. The fight began in earnest. It did not take long for Ruting to struggle. Xiao Yan watched with increasing trepidation until Li Xiang gave her sleeve a tug. She let her sight linger for a moment longer before turning and speeding after the girl. "She's hurt. She came hurt. She's fighting for me." The thought stuck with her as the background around blurred. The sounds of the clashing metal grew more dispersed and infrequent, but ever closer. "Hurry! Hurry!" Li Xiang said. Xiao Yan started to run again when she heard a single loud clang, which prompted her to stop and turn. She saw in the distance several branches fall as a broken blade spun through the air. She would die here. She would die. Lin Ruting was no longer trying to run. She merely darted around trees, leaping in circles, trying to bide time and frustrate her foe. Xiao Yan recovered her senses and caught up with Li Xiang. The little girl was out of breath and sat leaning against the base of a large pine. "If he finds me, I'll kill him," Li Xiang said. "No, you won't. Keep on going. Don't wait for me," Xiao Yan said. "Where are you going?" "Don't go back. Ruting does not need any distraction." "Don't worry, I'm gonna go find help." She did not want to say much more and darted off the path. "Please be alright until my return. You have to be." The attack came not at all unexpected. The villagers were like a rounded herd and trampled one another trying to flee. Ma Xianda positioned himself in front of Li Xiang and his wife. He was ready. His only fear was a failure to keep his word to Lady Lin. The assailants cut their way through the throng. Two of the attackers converged on Xianda. Li Xiang pulled Ma Wunyang back as they held each other and watched the fight ensue. As the ancient saying goes, 2 fists cannot defeat 4 hands. And certainly not 6. Ma Xianda recovered in time to see a third man armed with 2 hook swords advance toward the 2 women. All he could do was warn them with a shout. His 2 assailants gave him no respite. A kick to his back sent him flying. In his dazed state, Ma Xianda made out a joyous scream. "Ming Gaga!" Tang Ming, indeed, had returned and stood by the 2 women with a bloodied figure on his knees, screaming in pain a few paces away. "My hands! My hands! It hurts!" The man cried. "You don't have hands anymore. How can it hurt?" the young swordsman said with a condescending smile. Ma Xianda was up on his feet, invigorated by Tang Ming's arrival. He slashed at his enemy. The pu dao in his opponent's hand split at the handle, and without stopping, Ma Xianda brought the blade up again, cleanly cleaving the man's chin and upper jaw in half. Tang Ming was younger and faster, but the women he protected kept him anchored. Xianda joined him, and slowly the duel started to withdraw, alternatively running and fighting. Their enemies numbered less than 10 but were skilled. In a war of attrition, they would have the upper hand. "Everybody, don't be afraid," shouted Li Xiang suddenly. "Wuai Gaga is coming." The statement had a disruptive effect on the white cloth figures, allowing both Ma Xianda and Tang Ming to swiftly wound several fighters. The attackers withdrew from the fray to regroup and scan the horizon for Lin Wuai's presence. A shrill cry echoed from the forest, calling them into full retreat. Wei Jingren, though weakened, was still capable of defending himself, but many of his men lay dead. He stared at Tang Ming and mouthed the word traitor. He followed this with another command to his men. "Search all the bodies." Despite their fatigued and frightened state, the soldiers knew that General Wei's orders must be obeyed. A few dragged themselves to their feet while others crawled, and they went from body to body, stripping them, men, women, and children, and exposing their ivory skin to the white winter in a humiliating farewell to life. The sagging strength of Lin Ruting made her susceptible to Fan Kai's attacks, and a palm strike to her back sent her sprawling. He followed the attack with a succession of cuts that aimed to wound and hurt rather than kill. Her will alone was no longer enough to get her up again. Lin Wuai's woman was at his feet. Would she beg? He wanted to see her helpless, agonized expression, but the woman raised her head and smiled. Fan Kai swirled around to see if there was a hidden assailant. The act prompted the woman to laugh. The whore had made a fool of him. It irked him immensely to look sheepish and cowardly in front of a woman. He composed himself and grabbed a fistful of her long, silky hair, lifting her to her feet with it. What sorcery is it now? Nothing can save you but repentance. He yanked her hair a little harder until he elicited a grimace which temporarily halted her laughter, but her smile remained. "Answer me!" After a long, labored breath, she stared him in the eyes like no woman had ever dared do before, and said, "You are in a conundrum. What's the meaning of this? From your technique, I can tell you are from the White Sword sect. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a strong belief in compassion, love, and honor. But a man like you does not fully comprehend all that." An open-handed slap sent the young woman to the ground. Blood trickled down one side of her cut lip. He wanted to hit her again, but her smile stunned him. How could she? How dare her? "It's too dense for you. Go on, show me how an elder of the White Sword sect treats a defeated female opponent." The man dropped his hand, and Ruting continued. "I'm not a child, so you can't deceive me with your hypocrisy. Hit me, torture me, take out your anger while you still can." "No, you wretch, you succubus!" Fan Kai struck out at a nearby tree trunk in anguish, sending piles of gathered snow on the branches above tumbling. He had not thought about such things for a long time, suspending his faith and belief for revenge. Now that she mentioned it, he was more cautious about offending the honor of his dead brothers and marring the reputation of the sect. He looked at her with contempt. Though she pointed out his minor and understandable shortcoming, he was certain the temptress was using his principles against him and trying to tempt him to break his illustrious sect's sacred teachings. This was how she makes men sin. Fan Kai stabbed his sword into the ground and took out some ropes. "I'm not gonna harm you if you don't try to run," he said as he bound her wrists. With the longer piece, he looped it humiliatingly around her neck. "A little humility would do you good. If the upper rafters are not straight, the bottom rafters would be crooked too. This is probably why that poor girl is so misguided." Fan Kai tugged at his makeshift leash, choking the woman, and she fell onto her side again. Assured she could not move freely, he proceeded to build a fire. Ruting sat up cross-legged. The man was full and rested. Boredom was as dangerous as the sword. She saw in his eyes a look of desire and anger. When he got up, she scoffed. "What is it now?" "Just thinking about the rubbish you've been saying. Who are you to say that Li Xiang is misguided and that I am to blame?" "By the teachings of the saint, his holiness, the one who is equally deft with the sword as he is with the pen, the holy instrument with which he extolled the virtues of heroes and condemned the crimes of villains. Such matters are naturally beyond your kind. I have heard none of such teachings. Of your many faults, that is your gravest." "You say I have many faults. What are they? I would really like to hear what you have to say." "Teaching is one of the tenets of being a member of the sect. We teach principles to any willing to hear, and we perfect the art of swordsmanship to any fighter wishing to reach the peak of perfection." "Very well. I shall explain to you your many sins, and perhaps afterwards, if you reflect upon it and decide on penance." He stopped, watching her stare at him stoically. "I'm getting ahead of myself," he said, and tugged at the leash again, eliciting a few coughs from the hapless young woman. Ruting sat and listened while she recuperated through careful qi breathing. The soreness and weakness she felt earlier had subsided somewhat. The man was too absorbed in his own thoughts and expositions to notice her receding concentration and slower breathing. Her attention shifted to focusing her qi to her solar plexus. The tingling in her fingertips and toes grew, and she felt strength gradually returning. She hoped he would continue his diatribe long enough for that poison to wear off. She looked at him, and then behind him, where the broken fragment of her sword jutted from the ground and reflected the campfire. She let her mind stay there for a moment before returning to her meditation. Hey, you've made it to the end. If you like it so far, please subscribe and like. This lets me know I'm on the right path. And if you can't wait for the next installment of Snow at Heaven's Edge, then head on over to Amazon and read the story in its entirety for free if you have Kindle Unlimited. Alternatively, you can check out Dreamweaver and Duel on Mount Taiyuan as well. Both of these stories are done and available for free here on YouTube, Spotify, and Audible. If you want to support me, please consider going to my Ko-fi and being a member. Have a great day.